right now.
Well, I think most of you have are mostly finished with eating, so let's get started so we can stay on schedule. Welcome to, I think this is the 12th convention. Anybody know? What's that? What's that? It's more than 10 because we had the 10 a couple of years ago, but I can't keep track of them anymore. Somewhere between 10 and 15. The older I get, the harder it gets to remember this stuff. But again, we have record attendance. I don't know the number for sure yet, but last year I think we had 108, and we have somewhere around 115 to 120 this year. So, and a lot of new people too, which is really nice to see. We've got some great presentations today. I'm going to be turning it over to Don in a few minutes as soon as he finishes lunch. Hurry up, Don. Or you can eat. Yeah, you can put your plate up here on Daryl's computer. Anyway, before we get started, I want to thank everybody who has contributed to this. And if I miss anybody, I apologize. I try to be complete. But for the transporting stuff down, that massive numbers of picture tubes and all the stuff that was a lot of the stuff that was in the auction, Bob Gallanter loaded up his van. He did an amazing packing job getting all that stuff in and drove it down on his way. And our guys who organized and did all the physical labor for the auction, Daryl and Chuck, I don't know how many years hired themselves out for that. Don, of course, has been our auctioneer and MC for I don't know how many years, and we keep inviting him back. I'm not sure why, but other than that, he's very funny and very good at it. Dave Sika and Matt Patteray, especially Matt this year, because Dave had a conflict and couldn't get here until the middle of the night. And Matt has, really stepped up and got everything set up and was all ready to go. So, and we have live internet again this year. Cliff Benham, who did that marvelous job he's going to be talking about later about getting the Dumont field sequential monitor working, and it was quite a project. And he thought he had it all done, and then he was messing with transformers and what else? I don't know. He'll tell you for hours on Thursday, getting it going. And he also, of course, fine tunes all our color wheel sets. Pete Dexness, who did the first complete setup on the CPA prototype, and many of you saw what the picture looked like after he was finished. And we'll have it on later again too, so you'll be able to see what it looks like. Laura, who's does our registration and data entry, and it's a lifesaver because Larry does it sometimes and I do it sometimes, and we're very good at making mistakes, and Laura rarely does. Oh, you're here, Larry. Hope you're not offended. Chuck Azar is going to be going around when we solicit money for the museum, getting your names and recording it for us. Appreciate him for that. Grace McMillan has been making coffee for us. And John Tominski was our bouncer at the auction. And this time, we put the police tape up. And the combination of John and the police tape seemed to work very nicely this time. And I'd also like to thank all our presenters who have put a lot of work into their product, as we'll see. They're going to be really interesting. And we had several things on display this time. Mike Molnar brought his Western Model 41, which is really a unique little set, and I hope you got a chance to see that. What else do we have? So if I've missed anybody, I really appreciate, I really apologize. If anybody can think of anybody that I've missed, tell me and I'll recognize them. What?
Steve.
Oh, okay, well I don't count. Anyway, here's Don.
All right, boss. Thank you, Steve. How many of you purchased at the auction? Just raise your hand. All right. If you haven't paid your bill by the time we get back, your tires and hubcaps will be missing. We have no mercy. Why? Steve has taken it on himself all of these years to build a museum, to make the gatherings and the conventions for, let's say, 125, and we'll add a couple of people. Less than 200 people on the planet that care about early television. A lot of you came from the black and white era. A lot of you started the color era. A lot of you carried 41s on your head running up and down photographing events. There's a little bit of expertise in everybody in this room. And that's precious. My own expertise is changing tubes. Beyond that, I don't know what the heck to do. So I call on friends. And I've always been involved with a lot of groups, a lot of hobbies. And I got to tell you one thing. When you got a question, when you need a little stupid part that you can't find, you make a couple of phone calls and it'll be in the mail to you. Our gang doesn't hijack each other. They give, they help, they do, and they'll help us do the finishing touches because I don't even know what the word alignment means. Now, in order to keep this place alive for the next generation, we're running an educational program, really, by gathering and doing and communicating. And I was amazed following the emails when Steve and the gang were trying to figure out what is this chassis, what does it do, how does it do it, and who the hell built it and why. And then finally, they got it working. Because there are a couple of cockeyed geniuses that figured it out and knew what to do and did the research. That's what this is all about. Saving the technology for the next generation who only know to buy a flat panel and throw it out after 2 years because no one can fix it. Our sets can go forever because they can be fixed if you know how. And that's part of what we do. So when I'm motivated to embarrass all of you again, Chuck, raise your hand. Chuck Azar, as Steve said, will be taking donations. This is just like a fundraiser, folks. We got to keep the museum going before we got to send the cans of beans for Steve to eat because he's footing the bill for every bloody thing we do, and the $30 that we paid to get in today doesn't really cover much when it comes to heat, light, the electricity, the phones, the real estate taxes, and the promise. How many of you are going to be taught and learn how to rebuild CRTs? Thank you. We can't get them anymore. I've got plenty to be rebuilt, and so do the rest of you. And it's unfortunate that we're at the end of our cycle. You'll get a little update in a little while during one of the presentations. The current state of the art, or the madness regarding the 15Gs. I wasn't kidding with the 621s. When Scotty was still alive a couple of years ago, I gave him a whole bunch of 7DP4s. They came back, they worked fine. I've got them in sets. I needed some more. Scotty was going out of business. He was charging a fortune to do them. And then we've got the military CRT replacements that, with a little bit of jiggling around, work beautifully. But there ain't no more. If you got a 621, there ain't no more. It's the same thing that's happening with the CT100s and the 15-inch sets. There ain't no more CRTs. I got an attic full of 15Gs, but they're all to air. You can buy them cheap. There's nothing you can do with them, unfortunately, for now. So having said that, I'm going to rely really on your generosity. You've all been taught how to run this computer. What do you think, Darryl? I hope I don't spill any soda on it, on the keyboard. First on the agenda is television development at RCA from 1929 to 1949. Richard Brewster, where are you hiding?
Right here.
Well, congratulations. I worked for those clowns in the 50s and 60s, way after you did your stuff. So come on and tell us what you have in mind, and Darryl will punch up your computer.
I'll take the mic, sure. Great, thank you, sir.
Play when you're ready to go and pass those backwards.
Okay. Play. Is that what it says? Hit play. Hit play. I give up. There we go. Okay. There's a general understanding by much of the media, if not a lot of people, that RCA didn't really invent television, that RCA stole the ideas from everybody else, that RCA they should not be credited with the development or whatever of television. But what I've discovered in my investigations of the history, and I've picked up some materials from various sources that had never been published before. And I've concluded that, yes, RCA did not invent television. Henry Ford did not invent the automobile. But what RCA did was to take the idea of television, this guy, David Sarnoff, that many people never did like very much, he decided that he was going to pour the resources of Radio Corporation of America, notice the name, radio, and he was going to develop a television system. And This is that story. Going back 1 year to a very famous date, September 11th, 1928. Well, that date means a lot to me because exactly 10 years to the day I was born. I was born September 11th, 1938, and something else happened on September 11th that we won't go into. Anyhow, GE was really doing a lot of stuff with mechanical sets. There you have, this guy in the back here is operating a light beam projector with a light being focused through a rotating disc onto the subjects. These two items here are photocell units, which are picking up the reflection of the light beam. And the one thing that you don't notice in this picture is the room was dark, because the only thing that was going to be visible that these photocells were going to see was the spot of light that was reflecting off the different objects. And of course, you'll notice in the corner the so-called octagon set, which General Electric developed, and we see it at the entrance to our facility here. And this was, as I say, there we go. This happened in September 11th, 1920. I think they broadcast this play twice that day, once in the afternoon and once in the evening. And I think some few dozen people saw it, but interestingly enough, because it was on a medium wave, maybe 2 to 3 megahertz, it was received around the country by probably a dozen people. This is the type of makeup that was used in the days, not necessarily for that particular program, but the type of makeup that was used in the mechanical era. This was a 20, wait a minute, where am I reading? Yeah, this is 24 lines, 20 frames per second. And the picture was black and red. because of the neon bulb up there. This is the rear view of the projection unit, but the receiving unit. You can see the drive motor and the neon plate, which is about an inch and a half square, I guess. So what a lot of people, I think it's kind of funny to think of television. It was originally black and red. Then with the first CRTs were green, so it went to black and green, and then it went to black and white, and then it went to color. Meanwhile, at Westinghouse, which was the company that I spent over 30 years at, this was this guy by the name of Zworykin, who came from Russia in the early 20s, went to work for Westinghouse, and was all excited about electronic television. But unfortunately, his bosses at Westinghouse really didn't care much about television. Frank Conrad, who started KDKA, was broadcasting experimentally, such as GE was. He was broadcasting mechanical television, and Zworykin's set here was receiving those mechanical images. An interesting sidelight is this particular building where this was photographed was a building in which I worked at one point. I don't think the building is there anymore, but it was then. At the same time as Zworykin built the one mirror and the lid set, he also built a so-called lab set. In early 1929, Zworykin famously told David Sarnoff, now they were countrymen, so David Sarnoff and Zworykin, they had a thing going. They were both from Russia. And Zworykin told Sarnoff that he hoped that in 2 years, at the cost of $100,000, he could produce a workable TV system. And Sarnoff famously replied, "All right, it's worth it." Then in 1930, in a deal with Westinghouse, Zworykin's group moved to the RCA labs in Camden, New Jersey, together with some of those GE people. Meanwhile, RCA was doing its own work. In 1929, this setup was being developed at RCA in Manhattan, actually, and this is the famous Felix the Cat setup. Now, I have actually put together, I scaled off the size of this. I managed to locate 4 of these 6-inch photocells. I located a Peerless arc projector, and I got a Dave disc, and I have actually made this complete setup. And I've never actually been able to get an actual image, but I have fooled around with a lot of experimentally. And come to my house sometime, and you can sit in front of here and see what it's like to have a mechanical scanning mechanical scanning system televising. Also, in 1930, RCA developed this 60-line mechanical receiving set to work with with their mechanical transmitter. And I know we have one of these sets here on display. And I don't know how many of these were made, but they're certainly a very rare and interesting piece of equipment. And again, if you've looked at the one on display, that's what it looks like. The neon tube and the rotating disc, and then the power supply and driving system. And this is what the image. This is the received Felix image seen on the mechanical image. You can tell, if you notice, you can see a slight curvature in the lines, so you can tell that it was transmitted and received on a mechanical set. Then RCA wanted to pursue this mechanical system, and so they built up this unit here. They built 3 of these systems, and they used. Now you notice they have 8 photoelectric cells. The idea being that you could pick up more of the reflected spot of light, and again the peerless arc projector and the disc. And I actually met the RCA engineer who helped to build this set. So as I said, 3 of these 60-line sets were built. The electronics racks were constructed by John Paul Smith and J.M. Morgan. The scanning photocell pickup assemblies were built by Traynor and Briggs, both early RCA engineers. And one of these sets was provided to CBS for their experimental broadcasts. And this woman here went by the TV name of Natalie Towers. She was hired by WCBS to produce, direct, act in front of the camera. And I didn't meet this woman, but I interviewed her over the phone. And part of the interview was, she said, on July 10th, 2004, I phone interviewed 96-year-old Natalie Towers about her experiences in television in 31. She said, I had a job. I hadn't had a job, so I was looking, and I was looking over, so I went over to the Columbia Broadcasting System to get a job of some kind. I asked for a radio audition. I remember now it was a very dramatic thing I did. And the next thing I heard was, it was almost the next day, I got this telephone call, and a man said, is this Natalie Towers? Are you seated? And I said, am I supposed to be seated? And he said, he was the head of publicity, and said, well, I'll tell you what it's about. If you just come down to my office tomorrow at 10, we have named you the original television girl. Well, I couldn't imagine what this was, and I really wasn't interested. I wanted to be in the theater. But I would have been glad to get a radio job, Mr. Brewster. I told them I'd never